is Mary Olson, and I work for Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and I plan to spend about 10 minutes framing some broad issues. But Vogtle is a site in Georgia that has 2 operating nuclear power plants, and it made history last week because it is the first site that was granted a new license in 39 years for 2 new reactors to be constructed at the same site. So it's sort of like you imagine a big nest with those big fat, eagle eggs in it, if you will, and they're trying to stick 2 more in the same nest at that site. 39 years, though, since a reactor was approved by the federal government. Why? If you're going to make donuts and sell donuts, don't you have to bake a little more often than that? Well, I think there's several reasons why, and I want to talk about that briefly. And then we're going to turn to the proposal closest to here, which is the Gaffney site that Duke Energy is proposing to build 2 new nuclear power plants about 50 miles away from here. And that is not a big nest with eggs in it already. That is one of 98 sites that were actually canceled after they were already started on a license in the intervening 39 years. A lot of people don't know that 98 huge projects were scratched. Why? Why did that happen? And why are they coming back? So the first answer is that there was a big movement during the 1970s. It was your lifetime, you probably remember. In May of 1977, the original Occupy happened in New Hampshire, where 1,414 people were taken into custody because they had decided to set up a village on the site of a proposed nuclear power plant. They hadn't gone into operation at Seabrook yet, but it was definitely in the licensing process. People converged from all over the Northeast very peacefully, singing songs. A lot of Quakers, a lot of other religious faiths were represented, a lot of gathering together, sitting in circles, a lot of, as I said, singing of songs. There were children on the site. Very joyful event, but they determined they weren't going to leave, and they actually were taken into custody, and they did a huge teach-in while they were incarcerated in gymnasiums and armories, because there were so many people that the little towns of New Hampshire couldn't accommodate them in traditional jails. So a completely peaceful, nonviolent event then branched out across the entire United States into all kinds of alliances. This was the Clamshell Alliance in New Hampshire. We had the Kudzu Alliance in this area. There was the Paddle Wheel Alliance on the Ohio River. So there was a lot of engagement and activism.
The Shoreham Nuclear Plant on Long Island.
The Shoreham Nuclear Plant, and you can learn a lot about that from Barbara, who participated in many organizations, joined, and that one was actually even constructed and in low power test before it was canceled. But it is one of the 98 that is on the list that you can access on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission site of 98 officially canceled sites. But quite frankly, as much as I revere the activists who come before me, my aunts and uncles, my grandmothers, as it were, in that movement, I don't actually think that's why reactors were canceled. Part of why, yes, but the actual reason they were canceled were the vice presidents of the corporations in charge of finance. Like your wonderful report on taking good stewardship of money, these individuals in these corporations had fiduciary responsibility, and that's why the plug was pulled. It's because splitting atoms to boil water is just not a financially viable equation. They tout the fuel pellet as one of the most concentrated forms of energy on the planet. I don't dispute that. But when you take the 600,000 times amount of material that it took to get that pellet, and then you have this vast amount of radioactivity that is generated by the splitting of those atoms that will be present on the planet for hundreds of thousands of years, that little moment of having a manageable little pellet is very brief. And the electricity that we are enjoying right now is also very brief. And since there's other ways to do it that don't involve either burning coal, which we know is also creating wastes we can't live with, or splitting atoms, I think there's a lot of vice presidents of finance today who are also saying this is a bad investment. And in fact, Duke Energy will not put any of its stockholders' money, none of the money that you're deciding to put in there, is going to end up in the Gaffney site. The only way that will get built is with either federal loan guarantees, which is what Vogel got, $8.4 billion of taxpayer money actually from the Treasury is going into that project with a little note. I wish my mortgage had the little note that said, oh, by the way, if you don't pay it back, it's okay. That's what a guarantee is from the federal government on federal dollars. So it's effectively a grant if they don't pay it with no harm to the corporation. So their Southern Company's shareholders are not on the hook. And Duke's shareholders also will not be on the hook because I'm going to let Laura explain it, but they have a way to charge ahead to us, the people who pay the electric bills. So we'll come back to that. But I just want to say that as much as there was a lot of Occupy type activism in the 70s and 80s that helped turn the big ship in the public opinion, it was fiduciary responsibility and the recognition that this is just really not a good equation financially that caused the 98 cancellations. And the only thing that's bringing it back now is a new interpretation that we need nuclear. Well, we've always needed nuclear, right? Atoms for Peace was a way to turn that horrible destructive force of Hiroshima and Nagasaki into something peaceful. And my mother deeply believed in atoms for peace. I understand that. It makes sense. But in fact, every reactor makes plutonium. And so it's this bargain with a very interesting, I'm not going to say the devil, but something really interesting to make electricity and plutonium at the same time. Plutonium that's usable in nuclear weapons. So the whole idea of atoms for peace didn't really work out. Then we were told it was going to solve poverty and hunger. Well, that didn't really work out since it wasn't financially viable. And now we're told it's going to solve the climate crisis. And that's the fundamental reason that our federal government is giving those loans and those guarantees is an idea that it's going to solve the climate crisis. We're going to be able to stop burning coal if we build more reactors. I can't unfold that for you long enough. It would take me a whole hour to give you all the reasons why that doesn't work out. So when we come to question and answer, I'll expand upon this. But there is a report that came out of MIT that states that if you were going to solve 1/12, not the whole carbon issue, 1/12 of the carbon issue, you would have to build a new nuclear power plant every 2 weeks between now and 2050. Every 2 weeks. And the problem is they're coming in at somewhere between, they're still saying kind of 8 for the Gaffney site, but the site I'm an intervener on, they're saying $11 billion a piece. Well, if you build a reactor and you power it for 40 years and you pay all the people and all the expenses of operating it for one license period, you'll spend a certain amount of money. It turns out that if you just do the energy efficiency thing of not needing the power, using more efficient light bulbs, changing out buildings so that they're, what do you call that, retrofitted, so that they're insulated and you get your caulk gun out and you prevent all the loss of power that we have every day, day in and day out. You start using the power you're wasting. You can do that for 1/12 the cost, and you're going to generate approximately 100 times more jobs in the process. So you're going to reduce the same amount of carbon emissions, probably even more over on the side where you're preventing the need for the power. But in any case, you're going to solve the same problem for 1/12 the money and getting 100 times the jobs. What's not to like about that? I think both parties should be endorsing that kind of approach.